Welcome to Don't Chuck It Up, the podcast where we help students and families navigate the wild journey of the college search and applying to colleges without breaking a sweat. I'm your host, Chuck, and today we are talking about money. So if you are familiar, it is September 2025 as I'm recording this, and that means the FAFSA is about to open, and families will also start filling out the CSS profile. To help me with this conversation, I've invited my friend Dan Bissig, who is the CEO of College and Beyond LLC. Welcome to the Don't Chuck It Up podcast, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Chuck. Thanks for having me on today.
I am so excited to have this conversation with you because you and I are both independent educational consultants, but you really have come from the land of money. So you're coming from the financial side of things. How about you tell our listeners a little bit about your background and what you've been involved in?
Yeah, happy to. So I will tell you that way back in 1991, I actually started as a financial advisor. So I was with an insurance company, a series of insurance companies. And over that span of time, I ended up getting introduced to the idea of helping families with college funding. And I thought that was kind of a cool idea. What I didn't realize was that at the time, there were a lot of families out there who, well, let's put it this way, Chuck, it kind of sneaks up on them. You know, it's kind of like the holidays sneak up on them or birthdays sneak up or whatever.
Yep.
And that's what happens sometimes with college funding. You know, it's like, oh my gosh, that's right. Junior is going to college next year and I have to figure out how I'm going to pay for it. And so that actually happened 19 years ago. That's when I started College and Beyond. They call me a little bit of a unicorn because I do both the funding side of things, but then I also, by accident, ended up getting into the admission side of things because I did have a partner initially and she had to step away from it. It's like, okay, what am I going to do now? And I thought, well, what the heck? Let's give this a try too. So anyway, here we are today. Helping families all across the United States and some international families too.
Yeah, and I think the work that you are doing as both an independent educational consultant and helping families navigate the financial part of this is really important. Myself also, I used to work in college admissions and had a lot of experience with financial aid and how that whole monster works. I've had to physically fill out the FAFSA pencil and paper style and mathematically figure out the calculations. That is actually a training exercise that we did in admissions so that we as admissions counselors would know, oh, this is how the FAFSA actually works. Now, the calculations change and now it's not paper and pencil, thank goodness.
But that's the truth.
Yeah. I did find my FAFSA from when my parents submitted it back in the day. So they did exist, paper and pencil.
Wow.
And right now, families are really concerned about the cost of college. And as you said, this sneaks up on them. All of a sudden they go, oh my gosh, it's senior year. We have to fill out the FAFSA. What the heck is the FAFSA? And then there's some colleges that say, well, the FAFSA is great, but we also need the CSS profile. So help our families understand a little bit. How do you explain what the FAFSA and the CSS profile are?
Yeah, so they're truly the key to getting financial aid and in some cases scholarship money at colleges. So for example, every single college, with the exception of about 10 private institutions, require the FAFSA. And, you know, the whole deal is that they're saying, submit it to us so that we can see if you're going to qualify for aid. I will tell you, and I bet you've run into this too, families will say, well, you know, I make a lot of money and I've got a lot of savings. Should I really fill out this form? And I always say, yes, yeah, you really should, because you need to have it as a backup plan. Because I'm sure you've run into this too, but over my years of practicing, I mean, I've had parents lose jobs, have businesses go bankrupt, and even die or become disabled. And when that occurs, there has to be a track record for many, many colleges for you to be able to prove that you had submitted financial aid forms. So that's why I'm a huge fan of doing the free application for federal student aid. You know, there's colleges though that also require that CSS profile. There's actually about 400 colleges and institutions out there that require it. Some of them did it because they got mad at the FAFSA, with this whole transition that happened a couple of years ago when it was a total debacle.
Okay,
Thankfully, by the way, folks, we're not there now.
Nope.
We've moved past that. It was really smooth sailing this last year, and I'm confident it will be this year too. But but it's a lot more intrusive. I mean, especially for that family that owns multiple properties, or they own, several businesses or a business. It's a lot more details that have to be put into it. And it's intentional because the colleges know that sophisticated individuals hire sophisticated advisors to help coach them through things.
Yes.
Right. And so that's why it really becomes a big part of the process. And, working on that takes a lot more time.
Yeah. So to recap a little bit, almost every college wants the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. As you said, there's like 10 schools that don't require it. They have their own form, and most students aren't applying to those 10, so we don't talk about them very often. So really every family should be filling out the FAFSA, regardless of income, background, savings. I will add that FAFSA kind of gives so first you fill out the FAFSA and it goes to the federal government, and then that number then is translated over to the colleges, and it really kind of gives a 10,000-foot view of a family's finances. It's rather broad. It is not super specific. So therefore, as you said, there's about 400 colleges and institutions that have added on the CSS profile, which gives a very specific view of student and family financial capability. And why do colleges use the CSS profile? Because they really want to make sure that they are giving their money to the families who absolutely need it, and not families who just hope that they could get some money. So I think that's a kind of a big difference between the two. But yes, if you are listening to this podcast, you need to be filling out the FAFSA, regardless as to what you think, oh, we're not going to qualify or whatever. And I'm surprised how many families don't fill it out because they're worried about things. So what are some of the things that you've heard that families get worried about filling out the FAFSA?
Oh, yeah. Well, the biggest thing is disclosing their personal financial information, because the thing that's a big difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile is with the FAFSA, the information is electronically transferred, meaning the tax return. Let me be very clear. So we're using, for the 2026 graduates, you're using your 2024 tax return, or your family is. And so they're going in to the IRS and they are grabbing that tax return information and they're sharing it then with the colleges and universities that you've applied to, which is a good thing. I mean, it's very, very easy to do it, but it's not transparent, meaning you don't get to see what comes over. So the only way, if you've got any worries, maybe you, for example, had to take an extension on your tax return this last year, or even that particular year, I should say, in 24. You've got to make sure that they've got the right copy of the tax return that you want them to see, so that then they can make the best decision for you when it comes to their financial aid. Now, CSS profile is different. They use this thing called iDoc. And with iDoc, it's where you're actually uploading a copy of your tax return and your W-2s and things like that, specifically if the colleges are asking for it. And most of the time they do. They want that kind of transparency. It's just a different process, for them to get what they need. So that would be, without a doubt, that's a biggie. People being afraid of sharing their information with some college financial aid officer that they don't know what's going to happen with it,
Right. And what I will say is that for families who don't, so before we had the document upload, families had to hand type all of their tax documents into there. And back in that time, only about 50% of families actually filled out the FAFSA correctly. So there was a lot of extra zeros or lack of zeros or things that were happening that way. So I was really excited when FAFSA partnered with the Department of the IRS so that families can just pull their numbers into it. If you have filed a standard 1040 EZ, this should not be an issue. This should just be something, you pull your money in. And I know some families are like, well, I don't want, the Department of Education to know my numbers. Well, it's all the federal government. You are not it's not like you're hiding money from one place to give it to another place. It's all the federal government. You're just giving them permission to share between the two departments. so that the Department of Education can run the FAFSA calculation. And once it does that, it creates the student aid index.
Yes, it does.
So what are your thoughts on the student aid index?
Well, okay, so let's go back, not to confuse our listeners, but
That's fine.
it used to be called the expected family contribution, which personally I thought was a little more straightforward. That was my personal take on it.
I agree.
Then they changed it to this new acronym. You know how the federal government is, they change things up. So we got to justify our existence. So we're going to do something new. So they called it the student aid index. It's still a dollar amount. And it's the dollar amount that they're telling your family that mom and dad should be able to write a check for you to go to whatever college, whether it's a community college or an Ivy League, it doesn't matter. That's the starting number that they give you. Now, obviously, it depends on a lot of variables, too much for us to talk about, when it comes to how individual colleges hand out their money.
Right.
Is it more need-based? Is there merit in there? I mean, all those kinds of things, that come into play. And then, of course, that's from the federal side. From the institutional side, which is the CSS profile again. Some of the colleges are still referring to it as the expected family contribution. In fact, a lot of them are. Some are referring to it as that student aid index again, but that's a dollar amount that you need to know as a family as soon as possible. Because what you don't want to do is wait until the spring when you deal with the shock and all that comes with those numbers rolling in from these colleges because you never got around to it. And that's why we ought to talk about things like, net price calculators and things like that too.
Yeah, and I think that if there are parents listening out there that have kids that are younger than senior year, one of the best things you can do, I know a lot of parents ask me, when should we start the college search? I would say after you have filled out the FAFSA estimator. So go on to the FAFSA website and there's an estimator. It'll take you less than 5-10 minutes to fill out. It's really quite easy and straightforward. And then once you have filled out the FAFSA estimator, you'll get your student aid index estimated. And then that number can really help people like Dan and I help families understand, okay, this is what your student aid index is. These are the types of colleges that we would recommend that you take a look at. So a lot of parents go, well, how do we get our kid to start the college search? I said, well, have you talked about how much you can afford? Because that is a key component of the college search process.
Yeah, and for the same reason that you would not hand the keys to your brand new car to your kiddo, right? It's the same way when it comes to this whole college process. You really do need to start as early as possible. And I promise you, you will not regret starting early. You will regret waiting too late to get around to running your numbers because, again, I can tell you year after year, there are families that they just don't know what they don't know. They didn't run the individual numbers. And as I said a minute ago, they don't realize that number really can be different from college to college as to how they fill that funding gap. Because
Yes.
You may say, well, we can't afford, let's say that the student aid index comes up at $40,000 and you were planning for 30. Well, not every college is going to fill that gap the same way. And so you've got to really be very focused on that. And again, Chuck, like you said, that's how we can really help families when it comes to looking at those numbers.
Well, and I want to remind families that even if your student is thinking about community college or trade college or a much more, lower priced regional public institution, still fill out the FAFSA because community colleges, technical colleges, they also accept the FAFSA and they do have both need-based aid available to them and scholarships available. I really wish that every student and parent who is considering college does the FAFSA estimator early on. So whether your kid is an 8th, 9th, 10th grader, especially if you're an 11th grader, and then complete the FAFSA once your student is a senior in high school. And for those of you who are not aware, the FAFSA officially opens on October 1. We are currently in beta testing 2, and that is going very well. So it looks, to my knowledge, and Dan, you can correct me, but it looks like we are full set, steam ahead, green light. We are opening October 1st for the FAFSA complete rollout to the entire country. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah, me too. Again, it's one of those things where I think the media tries to spin it up and make it sound like it's this monumental thing and how difficult it is. But truly, The FAFSA is pretty easy to do. If you've got yourself set and you've done the number crunching, how much do you have in liquid assets? Do you have your child's social security number and all those things? Because, by the way, that leads to another thing that comes up, which is how do you get to starting the FAFSA? And that starts with completing your FSA ID. The FSA ID is the key to your student being able to get into the FAFSA so they can turn around and invite you, the parent, to do your side of the things.
Ooh, I'm going to do a pause right here and pull up that website. All right, so the FSA ID is something that you can find on studentaid.gov and then search for FSA ID. So that just stands for Federal Student Aid ID. And for students and families, the family needs an FSA ID, so the parents can use one, and then the student also needs one. And I always tell students and parents, keep this number available because you're going to have to update your FAFSA every year. And for people like me who went all the way through graduate school, you use your FSA ID all the way through graduate school. So that number was a key piece of my educational journey for many, many, many years. And that's one thing that students and families can sign up for, an FSA ID, before the FAFSA even opens. So that's something that you can do right now if you're saying, hey, what can I do while I wait for the FAFSA to open?
Yeah, absolutely do that. And whatever you do, make sure that you write it down someplace safe. Because I'm telling you, every year, a family's like, I can't find my number. It's like, or my ID number. So make sure that you put it someplace safe, because out of sight, out of mind, next year you're going to have to do it again. So you might as well, have it pretty easy to get to.
Yeah. Anything else you think the families need to be aware of as they get ready to work on the FAFSA or the CSS profile? What things they should have? You said they should have their taxes, information about assets, savings, and you need both parent information and those types of things as well as student information, correct?
That's correct. And really, that probably, Chuck, means we need to jump into a big conversation about what do you do in a divorce situation? Okay, because both those documents handle it differently. And so it's important that you understand that going in. And in particular, because what we're talking about is when it comes to the FAFSA, we're talking about the parent who provides the most financial support to the child over the last 12 months. Now, that gets a little confusing for some families because some of the old language that was out there was it was the custodial parent, the parent that the child lived with at least 51% of the time. That is not the case anymore. So where it gets really interesting, again, is in a divorce situation, because you are going to use one of the two parents. And, the question comes up, so what do I do if we're splitting everything right down the middle? Well, if you follow the letter of the law, it says that you're supposed to go with the parent whose income and assets are larger at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
However, also, it's possible that one of those parents is providing a little bit more benefit to that family than the other family is, or the other parent is. And if that's the case, then that's the parent who would actually be filling that out. So just keep that in mind. It's really, really important that you realize that, or that parents understand that going in. One other thing is if you are married or remarried, I should say,
right,
in that particular case, then that parent, step parent's information also has to be included, regardless of whether you've got any kind of a prenuptial agreement, or for that matter, if that other parent just doesn't want to provide any details, right? So really, that can happen there. They do look at one parent as being the custodial parent and the other parent being the non-custodial parent. So just to keep it simple, it should be the same parent who completed the FAFSA is the parent then that's considered the custodial parent on the CSS profile. What that means then is that student is using, or the parent, I should say, is using the student's College Board login details to access that CSS profile. Where it's different is the non-custodial parent may or may not be expected to complete it. The odds are about, oh my gosh, 95% of the chance that they will have to provide their information as well. And in that case, what they're doing is they're actually setting up their own account. Parents get kind of a kick out of it because they're signing up as a student,
Yep.
to do that. But they do go in there and they set up their account, and then they would complete it strictly from their side of things. And by the way, that information in both cases, one parent cannot see the other parent's information. That's another reason where families kind of get a little bit worried about sharing their financial details, is thinking, oh, that other parent's going to see it. But it could be necessary. The only exception is there are some colleges out there, and it's a smaller number, that do not require the non-custodial parent to submit those financial aid forms to the CSS profile.
All right. So let me recap to make sure that I got this all right, because man, there's a lot here. So
There's a lot there. Yes.
yeah. So for FAFSA, you need one FSA ID. So for FAFSA, you need an FSA ID for the parent and one FSA ID for the student. The parent who fills out the FAFSA should be the parent that contributes most to the child, correct?
Correct.
If the parent is divorced, what happens to the non-custodial parent with the FAFSA?
Nothing. Their information does not even come into play. So, for example, if they've got a 529 plan that is owned by and or is the custodian for that child by that family, it doesn't show up on the FAFSA.
All right, that's FAFSA. So for the CSS profile, and reminder, folks, most of you are not going to fill out the CSS profile. It's a very small amount of colleges and universities that require it. However, if your student is looking at a competitive college, especially a private and some of the very competitive publics, those are the ones that typically do use the CSS profile. And so for CSS profile, you actually use your College Board login information?
That's right. The student's College Board login information for that parent. So if you're married, you're just using that information to get in there and complete the CSS profile.
And College Board is the one that does the SAT and the AP exams. So if your student has taken the SAT or the AP exams, they probably have a College Board account. But parents, you're going to be using your student's College Board account to get into the CSS profile. If parents are divorced, they will typically ask for the contact information for the non-custodial parent, and then College Board sends them an email through CSS profile saying your student is applying for financial aid utilizing the CSS profile. Please log into the non-custodial portal and provide your information.
That is absolutely correct.
Oh, this is
great job.
I've been doing this a while, but sometimes I have to be like, okay, stop, pause, what the heck, who needs what, and how does this go? The websites are somewhat helpful, so you can look that up. The other thing I would encourage families is both FAFSA and CSS profile have very active YouTube channels, and they have walkthrough videos to help families understand how to fill out the FAFSA and the CSS profile. Right now, the FAFSA YouTube channel is still set on last year's FAFSA because technically last year's FAFSA is still functional. So once we flip the switch on October 1st, you'll start to see the social media channels for both FAFSA and CSS profile switch and provide updated information for this coming year. So if you're feeling like, okay, Dan and Chuck walked me through this and I still have no idea what the heck that I'm doing, go to YouTube, believe it or not. The Federal Student Aid YouTube channel has a great resource, and the CSS profile through the College Board YouTube channel has great resources as well.
Yeah, and just remember, folks, too, if you've not been invited to do one of these beta programs that Chuck had mentioned earlier, where you were able to start working on the financial aid form, the FAFSA early, do not go in there and work on it now, because you will accidentally be completing a financial aid form for the spring of next year. While your student is still in high school, you're completing it for college. So it's for the 25-26, and you got the 26-27 documents that you're working on.
Yeah, I'm smart. Even my students are like, so when do I start college? I was like, you start college the same year typically that you were graduating from high school. Okay, I'm graduating high school in 26. Okay, that means you're starting college also in 26. So parents, it's going to look weird when you see filling out financial aid information for 26-27, and you're like, wow, that's way far in the future.
Yeah,
No, it's not that far in the future right
it's
now.
not that. That's exactly right. It's coming up faster than you're going to like.
What about how soon should families fill this information out? I know that some families obviously are still working on their 2024 taxes if they need to make adjustments, or if they've owned a business, or something is a bit more complicated. When do you recommend families really say, all right, we're going to sit down, do the FAFSA, and get it all done?
Well, number one, realize that every single school has a deadline. And so, which gives you at least some kind of a date to put on the books as to when you're going to get something completed before that. So that's a good thing. I also suggest waiting instead of jumping right in there into at least the FAFSA, the first couple of days, because it's going to be, a madhouse. Everybody's trying to get in there, work on it. It's possible that the system could slow down a little bit because of that, as you can imagine, based on the huge volume of things that are going on. Give it a week. It's not going to hurt you. I mean, people ask
Right.
me this all the time, should I get in there and get it done quickly? No, take a deep breath. You're going to have plenty of time to get it finished. At the same time, make sure that you don't miss those college deadlines, because we want you to get it all in. Because ultimately, what's going to happen, the colleges will get that information and they will ultimately process your financial aid offer sometime likely in the spring. That's when it's going to come out to you, so that you've got an idea of what your financial aid situation looks like. So, because remember, they have to get all the data points. They have to
Right.
get all the information submitted to them, whether it's through the federal, government, the IRS and everything, Department of Education, or whether it's going to be, again, where you've uploaded that documentation to the individual schools.
And this does take time. I think we are in an instant result society where we want to hit submit and get it back right away. And it does take some time to give people a little bit of what's happening. Your FAFSA and your CSS profile, for most families, it's the FAFSA, doesn't really impact anything until your student's college application has been processed, read, and a decision is made. So even if you do submit the FAFSA right away in the beginning of October, and I completely agree with you, Dan, like, wait a week. Like, come on, let this thing sort itself out. Um, it it doesn't need to be done on October 2nd. October 15th is great. And for many colleges, you can do it later as well. I think there's some families that say, oh, shoot, I just found your podcast. You said apply in October. If you're listening now and it's March, are you, in a bad situation? No. If the colleges say that they're still accepting the FAFSA, please fill it out. Don't feel like there's a too late. I would want families to fill it out and not freak out about oh my gosh, I'm past the deadline. I don't have any money available. So fill it out and get it to the college as soon as you can. That being said, you're going to hear a lot of messaging from colleges saying, don't forget to apply to financial aid. Don't forget to apply. Money is limited. Yes, money is limited at some institutions, but I don't want parents and families to stress out. So your kid applies to the college and the admissions office needs to do its thing. While that's happening, your FAFSA is off at the federal government getting processed, and then the student aid index is sent to the college, because on the end of the FAFSA and on the end of the CSS profile, you list what colleges you want to have receive that data. So then the college downloads the FAFSA information. Actually, the financial aid office downloads the financial aid information from FAFSA. Admissions says, hey, we're going to admit the kid, and then those two offices need to talk to each other and say, okay, admissions is offering XYZ scholarship dollars. Financial aid says this kid needs more money, so we're going to look at the scholarship dollars, and then we're going to add grants or possible work study, or maybe offer a loan option. And this is going to take some time. So most financial aid offers, and except if you're applying early decision, most financial aid offers don't come out until, what would you say, Dan? February? March?
February, March. I mean, and in other cases with the schools that are the more selective schools, it could be April, right? Before you know anything about what's happening. And even then, sometimes, and that gets into a whole nother conversation, of course, what happens with that offer that you've received, how do you approach it and everything else like that, right?
Oh, I smell another podcast video episode with you, Dan. We're going to have to talk about, so when you get this thing, what does it mean? What do you do? And how do you decide which
exactly.
ones?
That's exactly right. What the heck do you do now? You've got it, not only that, but you've got it for multiple schools. How are you going to compare and contrast all those kinds of things? Because it really can be a big, big job.
Absolutely. I wanted to take a moment, and for those watching on YouTube, I wanted to share a couple of the websites that we've been talking about so you can visually see those. So right now I am showing the studentaid.gov website, which is where FAFSA lives. On the very top of it, it has the link to FAFSA form. As of this moment in time, it is still showing the 2025-2026 FAFSA. So that would be for students who are currently in their first year of college or currently attending college right now. It says the 2026-2027 is coming soon. This will flip on October 1st. So come back to this website after October 1st, and you will see the new and improved updated FAFSA, and I'm super excited for that. The other website that Dan and I have been talking about is the CSS profile. So the website is cssprofile.collegeboard.org. It is currently under maintenance, so that will be changing soon as well. But this is where you can go and figure out which types of schools require it, and how to figure out when it needs to be done and who needs to do it. So not every college does this, as Dan and I have said. About 400 places do accept it. You can go onto the checking participating schools list, and it gives you a huge list of which colleges require this. I always recommend to go to the top and say CSS profile domestic students. So if you're an American student, you are a domestic student, you want to know, is it required for American domestic students? So you would say yes, and then it would show you which colleges. Many colleges utilize the CSS profile for international students. So if you are an international student looking to attend college in the United States, they may require you to complete the CSS profile. So Dan, this is your time. I always leave time at the end of the show to say, all right, what is something that you would wish you could tell every parent or every student about this particular topic? So the FAFSA or the CSS profile, what is your soapbox that you would love to get out there and make sure everyone's aware of?
Yeah, well, number one, make sure that you cast a wide net, meaning that you've done the number crunching and you really have a good sense of how the colleges are going to shake out for your family financially. I mean, you have to remember that the way I describe it is this: you can be accepted or rejected from a school academically, but you can also basically be accepted or rejected financially as well. And, you know, you see it all the time where a particular school just didn't come through with the money that you were hoping for. And that can really lead to some tough conversations as a family. So make sure that you have gone to these websites. A lot of colleges, in addition to the FAFSA forecaster, or the estimator, I should say, do have net price calculators that are on their websites. In fact, they have to by law if they're taking any federal aid. So they should. The only question that you have to watch out for that, remember, it is an estimate. And so, but it's better than nothing. It's going to give you a sense of how the school might think that you're going to be able to pay for the school, what it looks like. Some of them do have merit calculators factored into them based on GPA and or test scores. So it's just a really great way to get an early idea on that. Sometimes there's an ability, especially if you're an athlete, to get a pre-read with some schools. I mean, I'm a big fan of that, where you can go out and get them to give you some idea of what you think the financial aid is going to look like after the student accepts, going to a particular college or institution. That's a big conversation to have, especially if it's an expensive school, say 60, 70, 80, $100,000, that type of thing. So truly it's about trying to do your homework in advance so that you don't get blindsided when you're really down to making the final decisions, and that also hopefully your student has multiple colleges that would be a great fit for them and for your family, not only academically, but also financially.
Lots of great advice in there. Dan, I'm sure we could keep talking for hours and hours, but this is a podcast and eventually people will get bored and start tuning out.
Really.
So I appreciate all of your insights and sharing all the great information. Dan Bissick from the College and Beyond LLC.com. The website, it will be in the show notes as well as it is right now on the video for YouTube. So check him out. Reach out to Dan if you have additional questions. But Dan, I think we're going to have episode 2.0 here to talk about what happens when you get your financial aid award.
I'd love to do that with you, Chuck. That'd be great.
One final fact for our listeners is that both Dan and I have music backgrounds. So that is a fun fact that I don't think either of us ever thought we'd go in this direction, but it is something that we learned early on in our friendship, that we both have music backgrounds and decided to go into this area of the world. So yes, you can have fun with the music major and help students navigate the college search and application process.
You absolutely can. That's exactly right. And there's a lot of opportunity to make a difference out there. So find your passion and go for it.
Well, folks, that's all the time we have for today, but fear not, we will be back next week with more tips and tricks to help you conquer the college application process like a boss. Until then, remember, don't chuck it up.